Hello, everyone. Welcome to our front door. Well, actually, our side door. Randy, if you could bring that back.
Yep.
On a lovely spring day. My office window is behind the gray bubble, actually, and not here in the office, but trying to remember what it was like and thinking of it fondly, especially the blooming trees. And also welcome to this webinar today about yield strategies in challenging times. I'm Becky Morehouse, Senior Vice President at Stamats, and joining me today is my colleague, Randy Bird. And just a little quick about me, long-term marketing professional. I've been working at Stamats for more than 25 years, consulting with hundreds of clients during that time on research, brand, marketing, and recruiting engagements.
And I'm Randy Burge. I'm also a Senior Vice President at Stamats. Stamats is kind of like a bank. Everybody's a Vice President or Senior Vice President. Anyway, that is not my front door. I live in Greensboro, North Carolina, heading up Stamats Southeastern Regional Headquarters. I've been with Stamats for about 8 years, and I've been doing marketing for higher ed for probably close to 30 years. I know I look very young, but that's the truth. And focus primarily on demand generation.
Okay, great. And before we officially get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to review. Today's presentation will last up to 60 minutes, so we've got a little room to play there, but it will not go beyond that. Please feel free to submit a question at any time by typing a message in the Q&A box. If we're not able to address all questions during the presentation, one of us will follow up with you via email within the next couple of days. If you experience any technical difficulties, just send a message in the Q&A box or call us at 800-553-8878. And a copy of the presentation slides and the on-demand recording will be available after the webinar. And then I also wanted to bring to your attention a couple of other upcoming Stamats webinars you may find interesting. The first will be happening on June 3rd at noon Central. Corey Kozad will be presenting Better Email Marketing, How to Stand Out in Cluttered Inboxes. And then just a week later on June 10th at 12:30 Central again, Joan Benson and Sandra Fancher are going to be presenting The Great Debate, Website Best Practices for Online Degrees. And you can find more information or simply register for these on our website at www.stamats.com/webinars. We really hope you can join us for those two sessions. I think it's time we can get started. So thinking about this topic, Randy and I had some fun brainstorming with a couple of other colleagues and just trying to think about, what's happening, what's not happening. And we kind of boiled it down to this year, a key problem is that indecision really equals inaction. When it comes to students' plans, when it comes to anybody's plans, frankly. So it's really challenging. Wait and see can easily become wait and don't. So we want to address that potential for the don't or the wait and see and try to continue to move our students forward. And there's been lots of information almost daily for a while there, but certainly very regular information from polls done by everybody from Marist and NPR to other colleagues of ours in the marketplace that with students and others shedding light on this. NPR Marist had just a recent study that 85% of Americans do not believe that it is wise to reopen campuses this fall. Wise, but it's happening in at a lot of schools. Randy's going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. We do know that students' plans are adjusting in some cases. A student poll recently that was conducted in over 2 months, March and April, found some interesting things. About 1 in 5-ish students said their plans were going to change based on what's happening with the pandemic. And although many of them still, about a third, plan to enroll in a bachelor's part-time program, moving to part-time, there are other students who are waiting to enroll until spring. Again, looking at probably a full-time, but not until 2021. A lot of students in March a lot of those students who had changed their plans were planning to take a gap year. That has shifted a little bit in that deferrals are not necessarily being granted. So that has dropped, and to the advantage of, it looks like, kind of moving up with enrolling in an associate's degree or a community college as an option. And that's moved, doubled actually in the data that we were looking at. So really overall, uncertainty is really the worst possible situation or circumstance for decision making, definitely, especially for a decision as important as college. And with that kind of investment, money, time, et cetera, it's really, really challenging.
So some of the responses that we're seeing from institutions and from systems are reduced tuition or guarantees of no tuition increase. We're seeing some schools offer some kind of a guarantee just in case. The California system has made the dramatic decision to go online only for fall. University of North Carolina system just announced that they're planning to be open with a large percentage of the classes online, but a shortened term ending around Thanksgiving. UNCG, Greensboro, just announced that it will reopen campus in August, but with very little detail about how. They just say things will be dramatically different, but they aren't really saying how they'll be different. UVA is looking at 3 scenarios. Start as scheduled with distancing, delay the semester, or go all remote. Boston University plans to open with a backup of a delay until January if there are issues. The University of Maryland system plans to open with the backup of online. Purdue, University of South Carolina, Regis, and Notre Dame are discussing campus instruction through Thanksgiving and then moving to online. And the University of Georgia system is now offering in-state tuition for all of their neighboring colleges and universities in neighboring states.
Yeah, so it really does vary. And I know that one place to look just for some kind of what ifs, the 15 fall scenarios, Inside Higher Ed did a really nice job of sort of pulling together 15 variations. Number 1 is back to normal, all the way to 15, which is fully remote, and everything and anything kind of possible in between. But really interesting to kind of take a look at what some of those options or opportunities might be.
So this isn't just any yield season, as we know. We're seeing more and more colleges going deep into their wait lists, especially for financially qualified students. We're seeing higher melt from low income prospects. Typically about 1/3 of low income and minority applicants change their plans over the summer. We can expect that this will be much higher this year. And really all models for recruitment and retention are currently out the window. So if you've been using any kind of predictive modeling system, you can't rely on it this year, obviously. People in recruitment are finding it really difficult to come up with concrete goals. So we're advising some of our clients to think about other goals, such as maintaining market share or basically just holding their own. Polls currently show that at least 15% of applicants are at play, and we'll probably see more if any spikes occur over the summer.
And that spikes in COVID and not in applications.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what we know or think we know and what we don't know. We know certainly that low and middle income students are more highly affected because of the current economic situation. We also know that higher income students and their families are making multiple deposits. So unlike some other years when the deposit was pretty much a guarantee that you're going to get that student, for your higher income students, that's no longer true. We also expect to see significant downturns in out of state, people with more than 2-hour drive, and obviously a decrease in international enrollment, which is going to go right to a deficit on the bottom line for most schools. We see community college pipelines growing as people consider that as an option for staying home, taking a year, and seeing what's going to happen. According to ACRO, deposits are down about 40% as of the 1st of May. Continuing registrations are down even more, about 44%. And we're seeing a decline in FAFSA application completions by about 3%. So those are all kind of interesting negative trends.
Yeah, and Randy pointed to some knowns, kind of some really either data supported or things that we just know are happening. The unknowns, by definition, are more amorphous. That's in terms of ongoing and long-term effects, and they're also equally challenging. And long-term being fall, next spring, not super long-term. We are seeing things like test and no test scenarios for rising seniors, what happens there. Even such things as that the typical placement testing that happens at college, community colleges oftentimes have to be reconsidered or thought about as well. Randy's going to be talking a little bit more about NACAC rule changes and what implications there might be there, but those changes have potential widespread impact as well. But one thing we can keep in mind through all of the knowns and unknowns is that all families, regardless of whether they're first-gen status, income levels, whatever the case may be, are going to be concerned at some level about their kids' safety and health. We definitely know that's a common denominator.
Mm-hmm. I think, as we see more schools talk about turning dorm rooms into hospital rooms, and we see actually some campuses talk about building on-campus hospitals, that'll be a double-edged sword for lots of parents, and certainly will create some mixed messaging about whether it's safe to send students back to school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the whole it's safe, but contingency after contingency. Mm-hmm. So who's affected and how much? Early indications are that the traditional commuter, dual enrollment, adult, since it is often primarily online, markets are holding steady, perhaps even growing as our online grad programs. We have yet to see much data regarding residential grad programs, so residential programs for graduate students. We do know that those in STEM have been seriously impacted by the closing of campus labs, and research for a lot of institutions is going to be a big deal too. How does that continue safely? But for the purpose of this presentation, we really are focusing on the most critically affected and affecting, particularly to your campuses from a financial standpoint, the area of traditional residential enrollment. That's where we're going to kind of focus. But we do recognize that this has an impact on every student segment. Okay, MELT or GAP. Randy's going to talk a little bit about some GAP strategies.
Yeah. We know that over 1/3 of students who indicate they won't enroll this fall saying they're considering a gap year, which is a huge increase from previous years. And we're wondering why not institutionalize a gap year rather than fight it? It could be a relatively easy thing to do. Have an online advisor, keep most of it online, have it in person at some point, do capstone projects, work study components, maybe part-time. So why not keep them in the family so they don't stray, earn some dollars for the institution, look responsive, and make sure that those people become part of our institution very early on, rather than going to a gap year and maybe just disappearing altogether. So let's talk about some ways that we might want to measure what MELT looks like. Certainly, we can look at deposits, and we know up to this point, deposits are declining. We can also look at housing deposits. How many students have put down money to say they're going to stay on campus? We don't have a lot of data about this yet, but I think we can be pretty sure that those housing deposits are going to be even more deeply impacted as students wonder whether they're going to travel away to school. We can look at orientation participation as a measure. How many of these students are actively engaged? I think active engagement through this summer, whether it's online engagement or whether it's engagement in some kind of virtual experience, are going to be really indicative of what we can expect for the fall. We're going to be looking at all those kinds of measures because our traditional measures are kind of out the window. We can look at things like deferred enrollment requests. How many students are taking deferred enrollment? We're seeing a lot of schools are saying that they are holding steady and being pretty firm about deferred enrollment. We'll see. We need to see if that changes over the summer, because I think as we go through the summer and as things change and as we get closer to the fall and to fall enrollment, I think that we're going to see changes. We're seeing lots of schools expanding their wait lists and going deeper and deeper into their wait lists. And actually, to the last point, poaching deposited students from other institutions. And that's a lot of that is because of the change in the NACAC regulations that are suddenly allowing that to happen. So, you know, just having a deposited student is no longer the holy grail anymore, because those students, especially if they're on the fence and trying to think about going someplace closer to home or someplace in a smaller city or someplace within driving distance, those are going to be at-risk students for your institution. And I think as we get closer to the fall, we're going to see a lot more financial aid appeals. We're seeing them now, and we're going to start seeing what's happened in some grad programs and professional programs like law school. We're going to see some tuition haggling and competitive tuition bidding. And I think that's going to change the whole world of financial aid. So as we look at what stages of yield are going to be modified or impacted, I think that there's this whole new area that we need to be looking at for incomplete applications. As schools extend their app deadlines, more and more people are going to fall into that pool of, you know, not really completing it because they're not sure about what they're going to be doing, and they don't want to complete the application, pay the fee if they have to pay a fee, and ultimately make a deposit. And we're seeing as people are completing their applications, they might have a financial change that is making them pause and wonder whether they really need to do that. And I think distance concerns are also contributing to the lack of completed applications. The next phase is accepted and non-deposited. This is being impacted by institutions waiving or deferring deposit fees, and those create false indicators that schools are doing better than they probably are. The deposit deadlines are moving, and that will have serious ramifications for the institutions that are doing this kind of deposit deferral. We're also seeing changes around the accepted and deposited, because as I said earlier, people who can afford to are depositing at many institutions, some close to home, some far away. We don't really know where they're going to end up going. The new NACAC rules obviously are impacting this, as people who have been accepted to your schools are being poached now by other schools. And we can also need to keep an eye on the housing and dining ramifications. Certainly it was critical last year with the refunds, but as we go forward, how are we going to do those deposits, and what kind of guarantees are we going to make?
Okay, so what does this mean? And this is where we're going to kind of dive in, thinking about communication. And so in a lot of cases, that's pretty much what we've got going for us, and where we can take some control and try to be as proactive as possible with regard to outreach. So we really are thinking in terms of truly a campaign rather than episodic or spurious outreach, because there's lots of communicating that can go on, but we want to really focus on maintaining sustained, consistent, and multi-channel outreach. It's not just a time to pile on emails, but true purposeful communication. And at this stage, and it's always been this way, but especially so, keep sold is really the name of the game. This is the time to think about nurture campaign. Still on this one, Randy.
Okay.
Don't give them any sneak peeks.
Sorry.
All right, no, it's
I
okay.
can't see what you're doing.
I know you can. Think about nurture campaign, really in the fullest sense of the term. Nurture is absolutely the goal because every student is precious this year. We'll talk about this more specifically in a bit, but prioritization and personalization are going to be your best friends this spring and summer. Even while common indicators of matriculation might be out the window, this will be the time to really take full advantage of your CRM to systematically target kind of that lowest hanging fruit, and whatever that might be for your institution, whether that's from a geographic standpoint, whether that's from key majors that students are really interested in, or a host of other opportunities. So now you can go to the next one.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And it's yours.
Okay. Thanks, Beck. We all know that well-branded institutions thrive. I think during this period of uncertainty and just I guess uncertainty, the well-branded institutions will be the ones that are driving enrollment, and the institutions that are not branded as well, that don't have a unique position in the marketplace, will be the ones that hurt more. Typically what happens in higher ed and actually in most businesses is that when times get tough, marketing gets cut, and higher ed student marketing and student services get cut, and these are the places you don't want to be cutting right now, because these are the areas that will ensure a strong brand, survival, and a great student experience. Fortunately for us, the basics of enrollment marketing are still the same. The journey is still the journey. It's just a little bit more complicated now. There are a few more twists and turns, but it starts with awareness, moves to interest and engagement, to nurturing, to conversion, to application. I think right now we need to be really focused on which programs we have that are the winners. We need to be sure that we are promoting the programs where we're going to make the best return on our investment, because it's not a matter of good to have, it's a matter of must have. We also need to be thinking about creating micro targets, and I know Becky and I had a good discussion about this morning, but it's really thinking about getting your communications as close to one-to-one personalization as you can. As we go through the summer, we'll be collecting more and more data on people who are in our pipeline. Use that data to communicate in a one-on-one fashion. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But just kind of keep it in your back of the mind. Think about a micro target. Don't think about big aggregates of types of students. Don't forget existing students. I think right now more than ever, existing students need to be resold, if you will, reconvinced that they made the right decision to start with, reconvinced that the brand experience that they have come to know and love will exist in the future, and that they really need to stay the course. And finally, we need to focus on exceptional experiences, both virtually on the web. But if somebody calls one of your offices, we need to be sure that they are treated with an exceptional brand experience. I was looking at a prospective client website the other day, and one of the things was on the front. They had a big thought bubble, and it said, "Speak with a counselor." And I went back to that website for probably 3 weeks as we were preparing a proposal. And every time I went back to that website, it said counselor unavailable. Well, what kind of message is that sending to your prospective student? What kind of brand experience is that?
So looking at some of the recommendations and the thoughts, we really wanted to just offer some key ideas and considerations during this most unusual yield season. We're kind of taking each of these points as we go throughout. Randy and I'll kind of trade back and forth and offering some suggestions that can help, hopefully, positively impact your fall numbers. So thinking about frequency, and yes, it's frequent, but we want to be respectful. And that's always the case, but I think especially so right now. So if we kind of pick off each one of these, thinking about how often. And we decided as long as you have something to say it. So it's not just kind of making up things to have a conversation about. It really is, if we want to convey something that's going to be helpful to the student, that's great. We thought daily is probably too much, but weekly or twice a week, and that might be dependent on any important deadlines. And I use the term deadline loosely because some hard and fast deadlines maybe have gone out the window at this point. So thinking about what those actually are. So a couple times a week might be appropriate, sustainable, and not unwelcome. So that's one thing to think about from terms of frequency. In terms of mediums, definitely the usual triumvirate of email, text, phone calls, and right now I think we could add a fourth, Skype, Zoom, FaceTime, but only if the student values, appreciates, welcomes that type of interaction. And the same goes for texting as well for that. We know that since counselors will likely not be traveling, perhaps even to the office on a regular basis, the necessary and most personal redirect in person would be with virtual communication. And we were thinking too about how postal mail can fit in. I don't know about the rest of you, but I listen for the mail carrier every day. And we know that even before COVID, there were positive signs that students were receptive to mail because they get so little of it. So that might be another avenue for something a little bit different or special as well. Hey, look for this coming in the mail. In terms of time frame, it's like, how long do we continue this kind of ramped up nurture? The short answer on time frame is don't stop. This year, the Keep Sold strategy is going to continue into the semester. Keep Sold and cheerleading and support for those students who do enroll. We're really all going to have to be very watchful of potential withdrawals and telltale signs of disengagement this fall. Especially if online, for those not accustomed to, or maybe coming off a kind of a tough online spring semester, that transition might not have been as smooth as some campuses would have liked. So that's something that we really need to think about. And maybe even talking about that a little bit. Hey, we did our best with on short notice, if this wasn't something that your campus was great at to begin with, but over the summer, we've worked really hard on this, where we've really concentrated some efforts, and this fall, the online experience is going to be amazing, or however I might be able to describe that. But that would be probably a plus, especially if they're coming off of not a great spring. And basically, we can't assume that when they attend their first class that the recruitment effort is over. And then to whom? Obviously with students, applied and accepted students, but since direct contact with families, parents, guardians may not be appropriate at this stage, this is where your web content and messaging is absolutely critical. So making sure that we've got everything that's going to be important to that audience readily available to them as well.
Becky will talk more about this later, but I think it's important to note that not every one of these communications has to be transactional or has to be COVID related. Mm-hmm. Some of these can be kind of just that life is going on as usual, and your department is still your department, and your team is still your team, and your mentors and friends and colleagues will be here for you when you get back.
That's right, and that's a good lead into the next slide, Randy, with touch point. So that high touch component is going to be really critical. And with as many touch point ambassadors as possible, and connecting in all those ways that I talked about on an earlier slide. If there can be individual meeting opportunities with a student, student to student, use those tour guides. If they're still on the payroll or still really excited to volunteer and talk about your campus, definitely employ their talents. Individual faculty members, admissions counselors, obviously, academic advisors, financial aid specialists, student service reps, coaches, club organizations, Greek, if that's an interest for students, and of course, alumni. Anytime we can have different folks touching base, checking in with these students, really going to be helpful. That communication should be proactive, scheduled perhaps, but also responsive, just being there for outreach from a student, but also taking the initiative to reach out regularly, but always with the underlying connotation of making sure that they are feeling welcomed and important. Well, it's a balance to note, and as Randy was indicating, that these are unusual times. We really can't or shouldn't ignore what's going on, but also talk about the usual things they need to do. Touch bases to make sure that they're feeling a part of the culture. Randy thought of one this morning. We were talking about it. A TA calling a music student to make sure they're practicing, over the summer. Things like that. Just, hey, what new music are you trying? Just one example. So again, making it conversational and personal, but also, if there's information that's really going to be helpful to them too, from a more transactional standpoint, a good balance.
So, we're talking really about using every medium that's available to us. And from our perspective, retargeting is really a great option to make sure that you're reinforcing your brand message on a regular basis, not only to generate inquiries, but to confirm the decision that the student has already made or that the student didn't make. So I think right now we can talk about retargeting people who have inquired but never applied. What happened to them and why didn't they? We can retarget people who haven't completed their applications. We can start building this environment around these people to say, this is a good choice for you. This is a safe choice. We should also be retargeting, and lots of our programs stop once the student is accepted or deposited, but we can start retargeting accepted students. We need to reconfirm that initial decision that they made the right choice. And then, and this will be a little controversial, but I think we also need to be retargeting current students. Right now, they are wondering, many of them, if they've made the right choice and if they're going to continue with your institution. And I think we need to, as Becky said, it's a process of keeping the sold sold.
Mm-hmm. So it's social. For social, we know that people are on all the channels at this point. So we really should try to take advantage of that unprecedented attention, perhaps. And looking at it from several angles, from an institutional presence, we want to have ongoing positive output, as well as, using it potentially as an opportunity to address any negativity or PR issues that might arise. That can be a challenge for some campuses, depending upon, that waiting and seeing, and then actually making a decision that can oftentimes get positive and or negative attention. So we want to make sure that we're addressing it from that angle. Also for individual units, athletics, academic departments, student services, kind of goes on. This is really a time to shine for those individual parts of the institution. It's where we can amp up the culture in areas that are of most interest to students. So, whether that's sports or it's, through an individual academic department, their program, that's a really, really opportune time to get students thinking and excited. And then also affinity groups, class of 2024, other units, city or regional groups that might include a current student presence. Facebook is still a pretty good avenue or path for this one. And Facebook is also a great place to access parents' attention. So again, just not, even if we don't have those wonderful Instagram photos of campus or, activities where students are all together, or it's campus-wide, anything. We want to make sure that they are still feeling that things are happening and that we have a chance to come together in ways through social media. I think this was, Randy, I think you were tackling this one. Hopefully you're still there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was sure it was, yeah, it was, okay. Good. And I think it's incumbent upon us as marketers to make sure that we are creating the kind of engagement over the summer that students have come to expect, and it will bring them closer to campus, to make them feel like they're a part of our campus community. So we're seeing people doing things like club nights and academic nights and arts nights and rec nights, all things leading up to orientation, which on most campuses is going to be virtual this year as well. We're also seeing some really cool things being done in terms of accepted students events. And from our perspective, accepted students events are really the final seal the deal event when people start to feel like they're a part of something bigger than themselves. So it's important that we really scurry right now to make sure that we're providing those kinds of experiences online. And in just a little bit, I'll talk to you about what we call the virtual campus experience, but it really is about kind of reconceiving the campus tour into something that is probably more meaningful and more engaging than the typical campus tour. So as we think about communications, it's important for us to think about being honest and giving the kind of messaging that isn't just about marketing hype. You know, this current generation of students and prospective students has grown up really quickly. They went from being, you know, coddled kids with helicopter parents to really having to face a lot of very difficult decisions very early on in their career. So it's time for us to reassure students that students and their parents, that we really have their best interest at heart. And, you know, I've been seeing some kinds of messaging in the press where, honestly, and if I can be really frank, I know it's just among us, but if I can be really frank, it sounds like the school is really protecting the school's self-interest rather than thinking about the self-interest of the students. So you need to make sure that everyone who's out in front of the media is really carrying the right kind of message. So it's important that messaging is honest and transparent and empathetic. You need to talk about having contingency plans. So you talk about your plan A, which is your preferred plan, but also what happens if that doesn't work out. So it's plans B and C. And I think that demonstrating a well-considered strategy, that you're really prepared and proactive is important. The actual plans are quite obviously your leadership's decision, but you'll have to be your campus's perspective and incoming student lens to what's going on. You need to build confidence that what we call the what ifs are reasonable and not overly onerous. So, you know, show the student that you have examined all of the foreseeable scenarios and that the action that you're going to be taking will be for their benefit as much as possible, and that you will have the student services support in place to make sure that no student feels overly put out, or that the condition is overly onerous on them. You have to show them that you appreciate the financial ramifications for themselves and their family. Really in two ways. First, being aware of the student's financial experience. And then you also have to be aware of continuing to build in the idea of the value of the education. That ROI may have changed. That persistent nagging question about the value of a college degree will continue to linger and have more importance now than it has ever had before. We know, for example, that right now, many students do not consider the online experience to be equal in value to the residential experience. And this is being borne out by lawsuits across the country from students who say, this is not what I signed up for. And we have to make sure that we are helping students deal with those kinds of situations and understanding the processes that are in place to help them, to help ensure that they're getting what they paid for. The details, the communications need to be grounded in detail. I know I spoke to you earlier about UNC Greensboro saying, you know, we're going to be making big changes in August. Trust us, basically. That kind of messaging doesn't really go as far as it needs to. That kind of messaging really begs the question, what are you doing? And how will you ensure that I have a great experience when I get to this campus that people wonder whether it should be open in the first place. And finally, you need to be true to your brand. This is really where the pedal hits the metal in terms of your brand. This is where you get the chance to reinforce your mission, your vision, your values. In short, it really becomes a test for how well you're living your brand. And I have to ask you the question: are you up to it?
Okay. Oops. Let's see. Is this me?
Yep.
Yes, it is. Sorry. So research can really help in these instances. And when we have questions or have unknowns, it's a great time to ask the questions of our audiences. And contrary to what folks might think, this is actually has been a really good time to conduct research. Certain kinds of research. Anything about tuition pricing, probably not a great time. Just throw that out there. But we have found really solid response rates with web-based surveys during the last couple of months. So we've actually seen higher rates of completions for surveys that have been distributed over this time frame. People have a little bit more time, a little bit bored. They're definitely on their devices. So this is an okay time to do this, especially if you're making the survey tool instrument, whatever, fun, interesting, or in some way beneficial. So this is just really a type of check-in research. Brings value to your students. You show that you're caring. Another benefit would be you can discover FAQs that you might not have considered. So if you're seeing a lot of folks asking questions about what are your challenges or fears, how can we allay some of those in a message to a broader audience or other audiences. And you can just follow up and respond directly to specific needs if they're having some specific challenges. And whether you have your IR folks pitch in and help, whether you do something less officious on the fly with SurveyMonkey or hire a professional firm, hint, hint. Now, subtle pitch, very subtle, very small. We encourage you to reach out with research. Again, it's really can be very helpful to them. It's informative to you. Really, nobody loses with this, especially if it's short. And give them a virtual thank you with a gift card when they're back on campus, or something that's meaningful to them as a thank you. But it is a good way to stay in touch. Just another avenue of exploring and getting some insights from that population.
So I think I mentioned earlier that segmentation opportunities abound, and you need to be looking right now at how you can use your CRM, your marketing automation system, or your institutional research department to start creating these microsegments so you can get as close as possible to one-to-one communications with inquiries, prospects, and current students. So it can be as simple as who's coming in from out of state, and the kinds of questions they might ask, they might have is how do I get there and how do I get back, or what happens if I need to get home. I know our headquarters is in Cedar Rapids, and I just for kind of giggles I went on Delta and I said, how do I get from Greensboro to Cedar Rapids? It's a trip that I've made hundreds of times, and guess what? You can't get there from here. So if I were going to school in Cedar Rapids, I'd have to find out some other way of getting there. And how about local students? You might have a lot of local students who simply do not choose your institution because you're local. You're the hometown team. But a lot of those students who may have decided to apply someplace else, may be looking at you differently now. And how do you reach out to them? And how do you reach out to first generation students? These are students who may already be confused, students and their families who may already be confused by the process and might be insecure, and they're likely to be financially challenged. how do you support them through the process? And how do you stress security and safety and ROI for their families? And what do you do about people who have been responding to you and have been clicking on your emails or talking to people and suddenly go silent? How do you reach out to them? I think it's important to build out personas for each of these micro targets and make sure that you're addressing the points that are salient to them, and that you use those points not only for written communications and emails and ads and retargeting, but you give those kinds of points and that kind of background to your counselors and ambassadors, so that they know what to talk about and what kinds of issues to raise. And some of these issues might be unvoiced by the particular target. And you can go down the list, and there's probably a million more of these, particularly as you get down to academic and career interests. As Becky said, have it. Maybe it's a TA who reaches out and asks somebody, how's your poetry going? How's your project working at Habitat for Humanity going? Something like that, so that these people feel connected and engaged, and that they are actually relevant to the institution, that they matter to you, and that their experience continues to matter to you, even though some of it might be virtual at this point.
So I know we're talking about traditional residential students, but this was in our Sunday paper and posted by one of my favorite local institutions, and I couldn't resist including. I thought it was a really nice way to remind folks of the opportunities available to them without mentioning COVID specifically. Displaced, discouraged, or disappointed, it's a pretty broad swath of potential adult students. And as Randy pointed out, choose from 29 tuition-free degrees is pretty compelling in and of itself. I just thought it was a really nice way to be a reminder without, really hammering on the COVID situation, but just, we're here no matter what for you as our community college. So just a nice thing, nicely done ad.
And well, what about the campus tour? If you've been in admissions for any amount of time, you know that the campus tour is really the first, we call it the seal the deal event, but that event has been taken away from us. That kind of one-to-one interpersonal engagement and communication is no longer available to us. So lots of people are turning to virtual campus tours, and we have seen a huge uptick in engagement from campus tours. For a long time, campus tours were on every website, but they were often one of the least visited spots on the website. That's no longer true. We have seen overall an 80% increase in visits to virtual tours, 44% increase in students providing their information, so actually making that first conversion, a 14% increase in time spent engaging on the virtual tour, actual time spent on the virtual tour, and up to a 73% increase in applications of people who have been on or have logged on to a campus tour. But as a marketing professional, think about these campus tours, and if you look at these, there is an incredible sameness about these campus tours. They all start with a beauty shot of the campus, and whether it's a 3D virtual reality campus tour or just kind of a flat video campus tour, they're all pretty much the same. It's a walk through lots of buildings without a lot of people and without a lot of engagement, and without a lot of making the prospect feel that they're actually part of a campus experience. So we have developed what we call, and this is not a sales pitch, I just want you to see it and think about it, what we call a virtual campus experience, which actually we think comes closer to making somebody feel that they have been on a campus tour. So we start with a welcome to, this is for the University of New Mexico College of Health Sciences, College of Nursing. Somebody comes on and says, hey, I'm a person from the college, and I welcome you to the site. This is how you use the site. And then we offer abilities for them to speak to a student, experience their simulation lab, which for them is huge and new, hear what alums are saying, meet a professor, actually take a campus tour, and then it's a promotional spot here for them to actually promote an area that they're interested in promoting. VN to MSN is a big deal for them. Also give people an opportunity to experience the environment. Obviously, we move toward conversion, and then a calendaring tool, so you don't end up with that console not available. They actually go on and they set up a time to speak with a counselor. I think what's interesting about this kind of a concept is it can use existing assets. It doesn't have to be, and I think it's probably better if it isn't high production value. It's kind of real in current time, but I think it goes a much further way, a closer way to get somebody from the kind of static campus tour into having some kind of real campus experience where they are starting to feel part of an environment.
Okay, so with all events, including orientation, having moved to an online experience, why not rev up enthusiasm with an accepted student celebration? Really an opportunity there to amp that up. We've got some thoughts there too.
So we consider this really to be the second most important seal the deal event after, I believe, the campus tour. This is really one of your last chances to make sure that people actually deposit and move forward. So, we're looking at creating possibly some kind of Accepted Students Day page on a website or microsite where they can see a brand spirit video and start to feel that emotional connection to your school, and allow them to see things like alumni videos where alumni talk about the cool things that they've done with their degree from your institution, and videos from current students who are talking about the great things they're doing both on campus and off campus. To give yourself a chance to reiterate your key value statements. You can also offer department and program welcome videos, and you can actually send that cool swag, that t-shirt and hat and flag or whatever you're using to their homes in advance, so they actually feel like they're participating in something that is important and directed at them and is making them part of a community. Perhaps a minimal amount of COVID-facing messaging, basically just that, we've got this. We have it under control, we have a plan, and you will have a good experience, COVID, no COVID. We also would offer throughout conversion opportunities to confirm that enrollment. We need to keep reconfirming the original intention, the original commitment. We need to keep saying, are you still with us? And if we start finding out that they're not, or that they're not responding, and that's another opportunity for us to get back and say, what's going on? As well as targeted info sessions around particular topics, to really get to the points that the students want to hear about that are relevant and important to them.
Maybe from that research.
Yeah, absolutely.
In addition to others that you have planned.
So kind of as a wrap up, and we'd be interested to hear what you all are thinking after this, but just a few points to keep in mind. Brand wins. Brand always wins. Brand, especially in a time of difficulty and challenge, comes out on top. And especially if your brand is vibrant and your brand is lived well by your campus community, it goes a long way to helping people through the decision-making process. Nurture like never before, including current students. And we're talking about, every medium, every opportunity. As Becky said earlier, how often is enough, or how often is too much? Enough is enough, as long as you have real, relevant, and important information to offer to your prospects, to your inquiries, and to your students. It's okay, but don't keep it just about COVID. Sometimes you need to get beyond that and start giving a peek into the student experience and showing them what it's like both during COVID and what it will be like post-COVID, because we'll all be around after, hopefully. Retargeting is your friend, but don't just think about it as an inquiry generation tool. Retargeting works at every phase of the enrollment journey, and I think these days beyond, and especially think about retargeting your current students as a tool for retention. And have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and make sure that students realize that your institution has considered what's best for them, and not necessarily just what's best for the institution.
Okay, we want to make sure we have just a couple minutes at least left for any questions that might pop up. One of the things that I think we hit pretty hard on the virtual engagement opportunities, reallocating admissions resources. Hey, your travel budget went away. Maybe we reinvest in digital in some way, shape, or form, digital campaign, thinking about how can we, with the tools we have available that are going to be most impactful from a communication standpoint, let's put our dollars there.
Yeah, Becky, just one quick side. I saw somewhere that most people who are working in enrollment as counselors spend 70% of their time in outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, outreach isn't, for this moment, outreach is not important. You have 70% of their time they're used to reaching out, talking to people, get them on the phone, talking to prospects.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Planting seeds for long-term growth. We're in the moment right now, but we have to be thinking that next group of students coming in. I know this is a yield-focused webinar, but that's going to be definitely, I'm sure that's on folks' minds, and we can't let it go too far out of that. That's probably a next webinar at some point down the line, but today it's mostly about yield. One thing too, I just wanted to, the honesty and transparency component is pretty important. And just thinking about some of the things that communication, we have actually a parent who received some communication from an institution, and she shared this with me about some of the things that the topics that they were thinking about or considering as planning team, a variety of planning teams on this particular campus. And some of the main bullet points were safely providing housing, how we're going to do that, what kind of approach we're going to have to face-to-face instruction, what's the custodial protocol, cleaning, what needs to be cleaned, trying to consider social distancing where folks congregate, what do we do with large lectures, adequate protective equipment and complete cleaning supplies on hand. They gave a time frame of when they were going to communicate what those fall strategies were going to be, and then really ended with reminders of the institutional, I would say, core attributes or values, and the culture of the institution: resilience, hard work, determination. Reminding folks of we're in this together and we can move forward together. So I don't have privy to the questions unless, Randy, if you've seen any that have come in. Close. So if we don't have any at this moment, if you'd like to follow up with us, please do.
I don't see any questions right at this moment.
Okay, please do so with an email to either or both of us, and we'll be happy to reach out. I want to put a plug in before I go too far. We have on our Stamats homepage, we have COVID-related resources, including our blog series, for some things to think about, and hopefully to consider both short-term and long-term. So that's pretty important. And let's see. Watching our social media networks, reminding of those other webinars, and we will follow up with an email link for this webinar so that you can grab it. I think anything else, Randy?
I think I'm good.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and really truly best of luck. Let us know if we can help.
Oh, looks like we have, hang on.
Oh, somebody's still there? Okay.
Oh. Nope, it's gone.
Okay. All right. We'll look forward to any questions if they come in.
Thank you.